Welcome to Wartime CEO, hosted by entrepreneur, CEO, investor, veteran, and adventure seeker Jason Tirico. A podcast centered around helping you tackle life's battles. Learn essential skills like leadership and sales to creative solutions to deal with personal life issues. Life hits hard sometimes. Fight back with Wartime CEO. And now, here's your host, Jason Tirico.
Hello and welcome to Wartime CEO. I am your host, Jason Tirico, and today we have a very special episode. Our guest today is a former Miss Virginia World 2016, recently placed top 5 in the 2020 Miss DC USA pageant. She was highlighted as a top 5 African-American entrepreneurs to look out for in 2020 by Yahoo Finance. She's a model, a hostess, and an author of The Model Mindset. Please welcome Sasha Perea. How are you doing, Sasha?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks for coming out and making time for us and the audience today. How has your 2021 started so far?
You know, it actually started off great. I decided to take a spontaneous trip with my family. So it was nice to get away, kind of recharge and reset before this new year. So it was great. It's off to a great start. And now I'm here, so that's even better.
Oh, that's awesome. Where'd you go? Anywhere fun?
Yes, I went to Florida. Florida and got to just chill on the beach.
Nice.
Yes.
That's really, really great. I mean, we all got to take time to kind of recharge, especially 2020 was so challenging for so many people. I mean, everyone for the most part.
Yes.
You know, so kind of recharging, going somewhere and getting ready for the 21, for the comeback, right? For all of us. So.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So
exactly.
So recently you wrote this book, right? The Model Mindset. So it's been a little less than a year now?
A little over a year.
A little over
a year.
Wow. Time is,
yes.
Yeah. And how's that?
I know, it's going by quickly.
Right. So tell me about the book. I mean, we haven't spoken, that much over the past year since you wrote it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is a beginner's guide to the modeling industry. And I felt inspired to write the book because I started receiving a lot of messages from people who followed me on Instagram and people that I knew personally about how they could start their journey in the industry as a freelance model and an independent model. Mm-hmm. And freelance and independent means you're not signed with an agency. So you're basically finding all of your gigs on your own and kind of building your portfolio on your own.
So you're
that's what I've been doing for the last, basically, right. Pretty much.
That's great.
Pretty much. Yeah, and it can be a lot to navigate. It can be really overwhelming. So I put together just a very simple guide for new models and aspiring models. And in the book, I share personal stories that I've gone through, how to really prepare yourself, like mentally, physically, how to brand yourself, and things that you should kind of prepare yourself for before going into an audition or a casting.
It's funny.
So that's what the book is all about.
You and I have worked on a couple projects in the past within the film industry, and you've talked to me about preparing for some of these pageants. And the first thing that came to mind was, the rigorous dieting that you were doing during some of those times.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
You were so dedicated. But I could tell you were miserable. You were just like, you didn't want to smell food. You didn't want to look at it. I mean, it's tough. It really is.
Yeah.
Tough. And I'll tell you, being a judge, when I was a judge for the Mrs. DC pageant here, I had a newfound appreciation for pageants and pageantresses. You guys put in a lot of hard work when you do that stuff. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of times people don't realize how much preparation really goes into it, right. Unless you know somebody who's actually going through that process. So yeah, it's a lot, but it's worth it.
Sure, certainly. And then, one of the things I think, you as a pageantress, as a model, and now as an author, one of the things you're probably dealing a lot with right now is rejection, right? And like critical feedback.
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about, that battle that you've had in the past, with rejection, so what is like one of the biggest, rejections that you've had, as a pageantress, or, as a independent model, or even as an author? Because I'm sure I put up a website and I get, critical. Oh, there should be a period at the end of the sentence. Right. And I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. So,
right.
Right. But I can only imagine the level of criticism and rejection that you've received, kind of putting yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a big risk, I think, whenever you do put yourself out there for like any project, and you do have to mentally prepare yourself for that rejection. I know one of the main things that I always hear or have heard during my time competing in pageants is different judges, different results. So that's one thing that kind of eases, I think, the pain of rejection sometimes. Is just knowing sometimes you just have to chop it up to like destiny and whether it's your time or not. If you had different judges, you could have different results. You may have placed higher, you may not have placed at all. It's just, you're putting yourself out there to be critiqued, but you also have to have a lot of confidence in what you're bringing to the table and stand in that more than seeking validation from other people.
Right.
And when it comes to modeling, I will say one of my first gigs ever modeling, I talk about this in my book, actually. One of my first gigs that I ever booked was for a big fashion show that actually happened the same weekend as Obama's second inauguration. And so it was an inaugural fashion show, and there was supposed to be like international media there. And I was like super excited. I was 19 and I was booked for the show, and I was supposed to be guaranteed to walk in the show. And as the time was like dwindling down, I was like realizing I don't have any designers to walk for, even though I'm scheduled to walk in the show. So I was like texting my mom. My entire family had bought tickets to like come watch me, like my little debut fashion show. And I talked to the director, and basically they found out at that time that even though I was selected by the directors to walk, I didn't have any designers to walk for because I wasn't selected by them.
Wow.
And at that point, I was a different size. So I was kind of like in limbo where I was too big to be considered, I guess, a regular size model, but too small to be considered a plus size model. And I was left without anyone to walk for. And so I kept it professional at the show. I got to stay and watch the show, which was a little painful because I was like ready to be out there.
Right.
And I remember I like came home, like had my moment, like shed my tears a little bit. And my mom was like, either you let this defeat you and you stop and you just give up modeling, or you suck it up and you try again.
Wow.
And that's basically what I did. And my very next show, which was with the same designer, I walked in with one secured designer and ended up walking for 4.
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
I think it's the same concept kind of with pageantry, where it's like different designers, different results, different judges, different results. But at the end of the day, you just have to have confidence in like what it is that you're bringing to the table and know that the right opportunities are going to be your opportunities.
Wow. So I think a lot of people deal with kind of rejection and criticism. I mean, how did that make you feel when, in that situation? Were you critical of yourself? And, how did you kind of get out of that?
I think the first night, I definitely was very critical of myself. Like, I think it's easy to fall into a trap of having self-doubt. And
Right.
So I kind of wonder, like, am I made for this? Like, can I do this? Like, do I want to continue to be put into this position? But I feel like the fact that I was able to bounce back and at least continue to pursue the industry and go into the next show and getting, I guess, a sense of validation by walking in with one designer and walking out with 4, I felt like, you know what, I can't take things personally. At the end of the day, like, these designers have a vision for whatever it is that they've created. And if I don't fit that mold, it doesn't mean I'm not made for the industry as a whole.
Right.
It just may mean I'm not a good fit for that person. And I feel like those experiences with modeling and also with pageantry has helped me just in life. And remembering that it doesn't mean I'm not qualified if I don't get a certain position or if I don't get a job that I'm looking for, it just may mean that I don't fit their vision. But I'm a firm believer in also creating your own opportunities. And that's kind of how I've navigated, I think, rejection as a whole.
Wow. And I guess, how have you created your own opportunities, from, or from those situations?
Yeah. Well, I feel like writing the book was definitely one of those opportunities that I created for myself. Starting to also help other people figure out how to navigate this industry. I know I wish I would have had somebody to help me a little bit more, even though I did have some training. It's a completely different ballgame when you're really out there and figuring it out for yourself. But in addition to that, I mean, just kind of building my career, I guess, as an entrepreneur, creating my opportunity that way, not feeling like I have to rely on, I guess, a 9-to-5 job, and just finding other opportunities where I can make a difference and also make some sort of income as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, all of that has to kind of wear down on you after a while. I mean, what keeps you kind of motivated in doing all of that, right? All that rejection, criticism. I mean, and then you're beating yourself up, and sometimes you're the one, beating yourself up harder than the actual rejection or criticism you received.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's easy to, I think, get stuck in that. And I think the most important thing is to remember, like, that's normal. Like, we're human, so we have emotions. And when you're passionate about something and you don't get something right away, it's going to hurt. So it's okay to, like, process those emotions and accept it, feel it, and then figure out what is my next step. I think what keeps me going is knowing that I have goals for myself. I have dreams of, like, where I want to end up, the impact that I want to have. And that's really what keeps me going. I would love to be that representation for other young women and other, younger generations. So that's part of my why, making sure that my family is, proud of, like, the decisions that I'm making in my life, that their sacrifices haven't been in vain, makes it all worth it when you are feeling, I guess, a sense of rejection. So whatever that anyone's reason is for starting, I think as long as you have that in the back of your mind, it makes the rejection a little bit easier to deal with.
Right. I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of it also has to do with understanding what your strengths are, right? I don't feel that a lot of people really, they're playing too much defense, if you will, right? Because they're like, I don't want people to see my vulnerabilities or where I suck, right? For lack of better words. Like, for me, spelling and grammar is where I suck the worst, right? And I'm upfront about it, right? So if I put stuff together, I'm like, they'll criticize me, and I've been criticized a lot for some of the things I've written, or misspellings, grammar issues, and I just had to be like, but that's not where I excel at. I'm awesome at so many other things, right? And if you can't see that, then I'm just not gonna. Clearly, your opinion doesn't matter because you're too busy focused on the negative things. If you can't see the positive, and besides, that's what they invented spell check for, right? So,
Exactly.
But you find how to augment, or you have somebody, right? Like, if you're in that position where you need, you're having stuff publicly available, and like you, I'm sure writing the book, the spelling, grammar, the editing of that. I mean, I'm sure that was, a huge undertaking, right? But you probably got somebody else to look at it, right? And help you and go through all that. So let's talk a little bit more about the book. What was that process like? You said, what kind of inspired it, but, how long did that take? What were kind of the challenges there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it took me about a year, I would say, to really complete the entire book, maybe a year and a half. It was something that initially just started off as an idea. And then I kind of started to throw something together. I feel like sometimes I can be a little impulsive, excuse me.
Right.
So I'm like, oh my God, that sounds great. I'm going to dive into it. And then sometimes, like, the self-doubt kind of creeps in. So I put it aside, but then I would kind of get a sign, like, or no, someone else would ask me similar questions. And I'm like, okay, I need to get back to the book. So I would say the biggest struggle was actually completing it because it's a long process to try to outline what you want to put into a book and, you know, what you want the outcome to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually having the courage to put it out there was something else that I kind of found as like a hurdle for me. Again, like I said earlier, sometimes when you're like super passionate about something, you hold on to it, I think, a little bit tighter because you don't know what feedback you're going to get.
Certainly.
But thankfully, the feedback has been great. I think people that have purchased the book have found it helpful. So I'm really thankful about that because, you know, I wanted it to be a helpful guide for other individuals who have the same passion. And yeah, so that was kind of the process for the book.
That's great. So what was the, I guess, you know, you talked a little bit, you know, about the hurdle, you know, but tell me more about the, you know, how did it feel finally getting it out there? I mean, I'm sure that was kind of a huge relief, huge, like, oh my God, it's out there.
Yeah. So initially, I released it in July of 2019, and I got an amazing feedback. I honestly had like no build up to the book at all. I just kind of dropped it and was like, here it is, guys. I'm having an event to celebrate this. So like, come out if you can. And I had a great turnout, great support system. And then I got just caught up with life and didn't really, I guess, promote the book as much as I should have with the momentum that I had. So I kind of let it fall by the wayside and just kind of promoted it randomly.
Sure.
But with COVID, actually, you know, everyone had so much more time on their hands. This year, or 2020, since it's 2021 now,
Right.
2020, I was able to really take time to develop it into a bigger brand than what I initially started. So now I've, you know, created like my LLC around it. I have created products around it, and it's on Instagram page, it's on website. So it's become a little bit more official than what I initially put out. And that in itself was a hurdle as well. I think one of the things that people don't realize is, or pay, I guess, it's enough attention to, is who's in your circle and who's around you and what feedback they're giving you.
Certainly.
And I had to take time for myself to realize why I might have felt a little bit more hesitant to kind of, I guess, start promoting my book again. And it was because of the people that were in my corner at a certain time in my life that were not as encouraging or I guess fully supportive of what I was doing. Wow. And I didn't realize how much it was affecting me subconsciously. And that was a hurdle, you know, picking the people that are in your circle, making sure that the people around you are genuinely supportive of you is so important, I think, for your success.
How did that make you feel? Like, you know, knowing that these folks weren't really, you know, they were kind of like frenemies, right? Is what you're kind of describing?
Yeah, kind of, a little bit. I mean, I think when you have people in your life for such a long time, you value their opinion. So initially, it kind of made me second guess myself for like a good minute. But I think once I detached myself from those relationships, I realized there's no reason to second guess yourself. I'm a firm believer. Right. I'm a firm believer, you know, when God gives you a dream, like he's going to help you complete it. And like he gave you a dream for a reason. And so I had to find that confidence within myself as well and just put it out there and realize that even though I still have goals for myself that I want to achieve, I have experienced a lot already on my journey as a model that I can help someone else with. And looking at it from that perspective, instead of looking at it like I don't have anything to offer at this point in my life, is what really helped me to just push myself and like really start to promote the book a lot more. So
when you started finding people that were, I guess, you know, not genuine, right? And you're like, you're beginning to realize these people are affecting your energy, they're affecting your mental state. Like, you know, did you just remove them? I mean, how did you handle that situation?
Yeah. So I don't like to make rash decisions when it comes to stuff like that. So it was really a lot of prayer, honestly. Okay. And I mean, I'm not going to tell people like, go cut somebody off, you know, just because of a comment that they made, or like you seem to find a trend, but like really pray about it, like do some soul searching. Consult with people that you do know are genuine and genuinely support you.
Sure.
And also, sometimes I think you can, in some cases, maintain a certain level of a friendship. It just may not be at that same level, or like that same level of closeness, I guess you could say.
Well, yeah,
so just make adjustments.
I agree. I think, especially as since, kind of when you grow up, like you mentioned, you have these kind of lifelong friends. And, I've heard the term where you would say like birds of a feather, right? Flock together, that old saying. I never realized how true that was until I started getting older, because I could see people and I'm like, oh, they hang out with these folks, they're going to end up doing, this, or they're going to end up being like that. And as you kind of grow in life, or even in your professional career, you kind of grow out of some of those relationships, right? Because your mentality changes, your attitude changes, and you realize and it's not even anything deliberate. It's more of, you're looking to network with more people that are trying to do the things that you're doing. So your energy and focus kind of changes. But I completely agree. You just don't want to cut people off. You want to kind of, work with them if you can, or, I've had a lot of toxic, relationships with, friends, or even family members, right? Where, it's gotten to the point, like I had to cut them off. They were just no good, and I remain cordial, and, it doesn't have to get ugly, but you start removing yourself from that situation. And I think that's another challenge that people have, right? Because those folks they're affecting your well-being, right? Your mood, you could be on top of the world. They come in and just start poo-pooing on everything, and,
exactly.
There's that criticism and the rejection, right? From people that you love, you care about.
And that you trust.
Exactly. And that you trust. I've heard stories where, especially in the pageantry world, right? When I was a judge, I seen like all kind of just cattiness. And I was like, oh my God, a lot of backstabbing, a lot of throwing shade every which way. I mean, it gets a little crazy. Hello, guys. This is your Wartime CEO, Jason Tarico, and want to thank you for listening to this show and bring you a brief message from our sponsor. Our sponsor today is Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's absolutely free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other distribution platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now back to the show. So how did you kind of fill that void? Like, so, I mentioned kind of going back to growing out of those relationships, right? And now you're going to fill them with new ones. How did you find more people that were in line with what you were focused on doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes time. I feel like for me, what I started to do was just dive in more to what I was becoming more passionate about. So whether that was networking events for my industry, whether that's fashion, hosting, modeling, pageantry, whatever the case might be, I would just find, and entrepreneurship as well, I was finding not better, but different communities to tap into where I knew that people were at least having similar goals as me. I think it's a lot easier to bond with people who may have similar dreams as you, easier to kind of like walk the same path with somebody and like go through that journey. So for me, that's kind of how I started to fill that void.
And I think that's a great approach. There's a lot of different ways I think you can do it. Networking groups is good. One of the I want to say pitfalls that I've seen with when people talk about networking, they say, oh, you should network more. I think one of the issues with a lot of people don't realize that it's strategic networking. You're just not going out there and just, running your mouth and, you're just trying to meet as many people as possible. I mean, that's an approach. You could take that approach.
Right.
But you're going to waste a lot of valuable time. And
right.
I think you will. I mean, I was a victim of it, right? I was like, they're telling me I'm supposed to network, especially at a young age. I didn't really have a lot of guidance in regards to how to network, how to find and connect with the right people. And one of the tips that I kind of I want to share is, with the audience, is that I started looking at these networking events, and they would have sponsors, and they would have sometimes a listing of the guests. And I would say, okay, who do I want to connect with? Right. And the networking event could have been like 2-3 hours. I'd be there for 15, 30 minutes. I'd go in there, I'd find people I want to meet. I do my pitch, my spiel, whatever, shake some hands, kiss babies, and then I'm out, I'm gone. And then if I had extra time, maybe I'd stay a little bit longer, right? Maybe it was a Christmas party or what have you, right? And just be a little social. But for the most part, I try to do those things strategically, because time is a commodity that you don't get back, right? So, get in there,
absolutely,
handle your business. You don't have to be cold about it, but be focused and deliberate in what you're doing, and I think that's very important. So, let's talk about the recent pageant here in 2020. You placed top 5.
Yeah.
How did that work? How did that work with COVID? I mean, I was just out of curiosity, how did they have the pageant?
Yeah. So it was actually in January of last year. So it was pre-COVID.
Okay.
My 2020 started off great. Yeah. So it was awesome. A great start to the year as well. But it was an amazing pageant. I honestly enjoyed it. I was really excited to place top 5. That was my first time placing that high for that system. Mm-hmm. So it was an amazing experience, and I was honestly thrilled with my performance. And I'm actually gearing up now to compete again. This will be my last year of eligibility. So hopefully this year is the year.
This is the year, huh? So you got top 5, and then this year you're going to do number 1, huh?
Yes, in Jesus' name. Yes.
I'm sure you'll do it. I mean, you're definitely, a hard worker, and you're determined.
Thank you.
I can remember all our conversations about your pageantry goals, and I mean, you're not going to stop until you hit it. So
exactly.
So what are you going to do to prepare for this pageantry? Like, let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what is that? All the preparation that goes into that.
Absolutely. So obviously the physical component is probably the most obvious when you're competing. So for that, I am getting back on a post-holiday diet, I guess you could say. Right. So a lot of working out, eating healthy. It really is about a lifestyle. So I don't like to make any drastic changes. I'm about 3 months out right now. So 3.5 months out. So I don't have to go as hard as I would obviously in the last month. But really just starting to prepare myself mentally and physically. Mentally is really just getting back into that mindset of competing again. Feeling confident in who I am, knowing what I stand for, staying up to date with politics and current events and world events. And those are probably the biggest aspects of preparing. And then obviously the wardrobe aspect, which I think is the most fun.
Oh yeah. So I can imagine the wardrobe pieces being the most fun. But it sounds like you really have to stay motivated for this, right? It's because
you do.
How long does typically, like, preparing for a pageant take?
So everyone is a little different. For me, I usually like to do like 5 to 3 months ahead.
Wow.
That's usually how much time I dedicate to a pageant. Yeah, it's a pageant prep.
So motivation is a factor there. So do you think motivation is a matter of actually being motivated all that time, or do you think it's more of like developing a discipline, in your opinion?
Definitely developing a discipline.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hands down, no question about it. Especially I think the closer you get to a goal, you are, I think, at least for me, when I compete in pageants, it can get a little stressful, especially when you're juggling work and like regular life with workouts and prep and everything that you have to do. The last couple months, usually I'm doing like 2 workouts a day. So you get tired and you don't feel like working out, or you don't feel like sticking to your diet, or you go to a birthday party and they have Chick-fil-A and you're on a soup cleanse for like 5 days. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of discipline.
So what,
So I
what,
think that's how you stay motivated.
what in your definition is discipline? I don't think a lot of people understand what discipline is. So I just want to see
Hmm.
your thoughts. How would you define discipline?
Good question. How I would define discipline. So I actually saw a video on YouTube that talked about discipline, probably like 2 years ago. And they described it as self-love. Discipline equals self-love. And I
Okay.
really liked that definition, because I think you're making a commitment to yourself when you are disciplined.
Sure.
And I think it's really easy to make commitments to other people, whether it's your job or relationships or whatever the case might be. But to make a commitment to yourself to be disciplined equals self-love. And so I think that's how I would define it myself as well.
No, I think that's a great definition, very motivational as well. What I found, and the reason I asked, because I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand it for myself. I've
Mm-hmm.
grown up, and I remember, like my father telling me, you have to develop discipline. You need to be more disciplined. And in my mind, I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? What do you mean by disciplined?
Yeah.
What does that mean? I don't, I thought I understood, but I really didn't. And,
Mm-hmm.
as I've gotten older, I've questioned it. What does that really mean to be disciplined? And my
Mm-hmm.
simple definition and understanding is doing things, and really what it is developing a habit to the point where
Mm-hmm.
no matter how you personally feel. So like you mentioned, I don't feel like working out, or I'm going to stick to my diet. You repetitively practice something to the point where you're not deterred from it, from
Mm-hmm.
following that
Mm-hmm.
path, right? And that's where that discipline. So no matter what it is, whether it's working out or you're dieting, or your work habits, your daily rituals, right? When you develop those habits, they become a discipline, and nothing will deter you from doing them. Or if you do decide to deter from them, it's more of on your terms. So if you do decide to
Mm-hmm.
indulge in your Chick-fil-A, right, you can
Right.
easily, it's like you're not going to fall off the wagon, right? Like you'll be able to get back on it and back on
Right.
track, because you're in control, because you've developed that discipline. And I think that's very, very
Mm-hmm.
hard for people to do. Um, so real quick, what advice would you give to some of the folks, some of the listeners now, whether they're entrepreneurs, aspiring models, future pageantresses of the world, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I think when you set out for any goal, whether it's modeling, pageantry, entrepreneurship, is do not self-sabotage and take yourself out of the race before you even really participate in it. Um, I've been told multiple times it's better to go for something than to wonder what if and have regrets.
Sure.
And so that's my advice for somebody, because I know that's the advice that I've taken for myself. And that's helped me to just kind of take risks, no matter how scary certain risks might feel like at times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, don't self-sabotage, believe in yourself, be careful who's in your circle,
Right.
and and have confidence in who you are and what you're bringing to the table, because everyone on this planet has a purpose and a mission. And one of the quotes that I really like and hold dear to my heart is, someone somewhere is waiting for you to fulfill your dream and your purpose. And so don't take yourself out of the race before you even start.
No, that is really great advice. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think people tend to self-sabotage more than anything. If I had a penny for every time I talked to somebody and they said, "Hey, I want to do something," and they're the only one standing in their own way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just put it out there. Who
Mm-hmm.
cares? Because I think, kind of going back to, the dealing with rejection, right? Dealing with the
Mm-hmm.
criticism, and no matter what you do, you're gonna get it, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
matter. And what you have to do is just realize you have to start somewhere, right? You got to allow yourself to
exactly.
begin to be a beginner at something before you're an expert. You're not going to, become a social media influencer overnight. It's going to take time. And, and,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to
Mm-hmm.
start off just being nobody, with a couple hundred followers, if you even have that, you may have 10 or 15.
Right.
But you know what? You just keep working at it, and you develop that discipline over time. And that discipline, in my mind, and what I've seen, is what helps give you motivation, right? Because you'll have those daily challenges, those daily battles, it's too early in the morning. I don't feel like waking up. I don't want to work out. I want to go for that run, I think I really would like to have pizza today, or maybe, my work schedule, I'm working almost 16 hours a day, back to back. And you know what, at the end of the day, sometimes like, hey, you know what, I'm going to go work out, and it's 11 o'clock at night, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Nah, I got to get it. Right. Partially because I got to work out my issues and my frustrations, but it helps with the motivation. Right. So it definitely,
absolutely.
So on the show, I'm asking everyone, so this is kind of one of my staple questions of the show. Right. And because, the Wartime CEO show, we're talking about fighting life's battles, no matter what they are, and how we can help people overcome some of those challenges that they're facing in their lives. So what is a recent moment where you had to put on your Wartime CEO hat and overcome a challenge or an issue?
That is a good one. A recent time where I had to overcome a challenge. Well, I think the challenge that I faced last year is probably the same one that everyone across the world also faced. So I would say COVID.
Okay.
COVID, yeah. Dealing with COVID, I was actually laid off because of COVID.
Oh, wow.
And so I was kind of put in a position of, what am I going to do next? And how am I going to figure this out? I didn't want to panic. Obviously, this is something that everybody in the entire world is dealing with. So I ended up, that's actually the reason why I decided to pour so much into my book this past year, because I wanted to not be put in that position again of having to depend on somebody else for a source of income. Yeah. I wanted that level of independence where I can't get laid off from my job because I'm my own boss. So that's actually, I guess, probably the biggest hurdle I've had in 2020, like a lot of other people. And it's been pretty fruitful. I'm thankful to be developing a following for Model Mindset, right, and really starting to learn more about entrepreneurship and building that up. So
that's great.
Yeah, that's what
I mean, entrepreneurship is not, it's not an easy task. It's not for the faint of heart, but, COVID and so many people out there have, lost their job, employment, or, they've been facing all kind of challenges. So, I can definitely understand, how that was, you had to get up and put on your Wartime CEO hat and we got to go to work. You're going to take
exactly,
kind of keep on going, right? You can't stop. Don't let it deter you. Don't let that situation determine the outcome of the story. You're in control of what's going to happen.
Exactly.
No matter what. I'm also a firm believer in working hard and playing harder. Right. And you know that.
Me too. Yes.
But it's not, you may not get that opportunity all the time. Right. And how do you stay or how do you kind of maintain your sanity, right? You have a lot going on.
Yeah.
Do you take time out? Do you have an outlet? What are some of the things you do that help you kind of recharge the batteries, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to schedule time for yourself as much as you schedule time for productivity. Mm-hmm. And so for me, sometimes that is just watching Netflix or hanging out with friends, hanging out with family, meditating. I love comedy, like stand-up comedy. So I will sometimes just find a funny video on YouTube of Def Jam comedy and just watch it because I know I'm going to laugh. I know I'm going to have a good time. And it's just my relaxation moment. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to stay sane because mental health is so important, especially right now with everything that's going on in the world. It's easy to get sucked into politics, obviously the fear with COVID. Life is always going to be crazy, but I think last year was obviously exceptionally crazy. So just making sure that you tap into the things that make you happy is key in order to be successful, because you can't be productive if you're pouring from an empty cup.
Yeah, you have to recharge the batteries. It's so important to rest, to take time out, and whatever it is you do, you draw, you read, you watch movies, you play video games, whatever it is, you gotta take time out to do that. Allow your body to recharge, let your mind go blank, right? Do you have a favorite comic or show that you like to watch?
So I would say I love like old school Tommy Davidson when it comes to comedy.
Yeah.
I
did a couple of jobs. So I used to have I used to moonlight as a personal security for celebrities, and I actually bodyguarded them a couple of times. Yeah, he's a good.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
Yeah, it was him and Cedric the Entertainer, and they had us cracking up so much. Yeah. I could barely do my job. I mean, we're hanging out at the club with them. And we're supposed to protect them.
Can only imagine, right?
Yeah. These guys, I mean, they're such great guys. So really good people. So
nice. That's good to hear. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. So
I enjoy watching their old stuff.
Yeah, their stuff is really, really fun. Especially his movies were pretty good as well. So what's your what's next? What's next for you?
Yeah. Well, what's next is preparing for Miss DC USA. So that is the closest, I guess, deadline for me, because that's in April.
Right.
So that is where most of my attention is right now. But in addition to that is really just continuing to develop the brand for Model Mindset. I am working on a couple cool projects for it that I plan to release in the next 2 months. So if you guys stay tuned or want to follow Model Mindset on Instagram, I will be announcing that later. But yeah, I would say those are the biggest two things that I'm focusing on in this moment.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
No, I don't think I have too much more to say. I guess I'll just reiterate what I mentioned earlier, which was obviously be careful with your circle, believe in yourself, don't self-sabotage, and make sure you guys keep listening to Wartime, my Wartime CEO, because obviously you're going to be hearing a lot of great gems with Jason.
Well, thank you so much, Sasha. Thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome.
Well, there you have it. If you have more questions or would like to speak with Sasha, please reach out to her at model-mindset.com or DM her at Model Mindset. I'm your host, Jason Tirico, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Wartime CEO. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. There's strength in numbers. And with Wartime CEO and Jason, you'll never again fight a battle alone. Do you have a problem or issue you're battling? Please feel free to leave Jason a voice message at mywartimeceo.com. We'll see you next time.